This is the 2020 Supra, and this is my take on a custom car audio build. But wait, rewind. Who is this car for? How did this project come about? And how did I design this project? What were the steps for building? And where is this Supra going? My friends, it's time for the full Supra build log. So here's the deal. About a month ago, I got an interesting phone call from these guys right here, JL Audio. And they had an interesting project that they were working on for SEMA where they were collaborating with another YouTuber. The project vehicle, a 2020 Toyota Supra. Now, if you have followed my channel since the beginning, you know that I didn't just one day wake up and get out of bed and build like I do now. This channel has been a documentary of my growth, and while I used to use a router on the ground and used washers as templates, things have definitely changed. Now, there are two reasons that I'm even mentioning this. Reason number one, this is my first time having a build in a booth at SEMA. It's a bit of a milestone and I'm pretty excited about it. And the second reason that I mention this is I went from having no experience whatsoever and hand-me-down tools to developing my craft into what it has become today, and there's no reason that you can't too. I remember looking at SEMA builds and wondering if I could one day be a part of something like that, so I'm just hoping that I can maybe even inspire just one of you guys out there to tell you you can do this. And that, my friends, is why I jumped at this opportunity to help with this build. Now let's talk details because there are a lot of moving parts here with this collaboration on this project. Since I am focusing on the fabrication of the amplifier rack and the subwoofer enclosure, I've teamed up with a shop called Sounds Plus as they will do the wiring of the speakers and amplifier and tuning of the complete system. Now the owners of the Supra are Kevin and Brittany of Light Bright Studios. That's the name of their YouTube channel. They're both avid car enthusiasts and they actually had me on a video on their channel. More on this later. Finally, we of course worked with the awesome folks over at JL Audio who sponsored this build and provided all of the gear. Now a bit of a side note, this is a long video because it's going to cover the entire build and you guys know that I'm long-winded. I like to explain everything. So to help you out, I put some timestamps down in the video description so you can check out different sections of this video. My first step on this project, the first thing I had to do, I got a ton of pictures of the car and some basic measurements allowing me to come up with a plan. All right, guys. So let's talk about this design. For a project like this that is for a show car where there's multiple sponsors involved, where there's different parties actually working on the vehicle, where I won't have a ton of time with the vehicle itself, I think it's really important to come up with an actual design. This design could be as simple as sketches on paper, or we could even go to this level right here where we use computer-aided design. I want to talk about what I came up with for this design and what the overall plan is with you guys so you can follow along. First off, let's talk about our subwoofer enclosure here. So this is going to feature a JL Audio 10 TW3, which is a shallow mount subwoofer because one of the main design goals behind this system was to keep the subwoofer enclosure as small as possible and also to allow it to be removable. Now the other thing I want to talk about with you guys is this right here, design inspiration, design elements, and this will give you an idea how I came up with a lot of the design and shapes for this build. What I have here on screen is a picture of the door panel on this vehicle, and you can see that there's a lot of really hard lines, like straight line here, which is kind of different because the Supra itself actually has a pretty curvaceous exterior. But on the inside of this, again, hard line, and you can see that these hard lines are met in the corners here with kind of a smoothed radius. So keep that in mind. The other thing I want to call your attention to is look at this tweeter right here on the door panel. You can see it has this shape. It's kind of a circle, and then it's got like this extended section that comes out of it. So straight design elements and that extended circle. You can see that I carried both of those over into this enclosure. We've got the straight design elements here that have the radiused corner, and then we also have that extended circle. On this case, I wanted it to be on each side to give it some symmetry around the subwoofer. For this front corner of the enclosure, I didn't want it to have a hard, sharp corner like a normal enclosure would, so I'm actually going to be kerfing the wood to bend it over the front of the box. Some other design elements in the corners here just to give it a little bit more of an interesting look. And then I've got these wings modeled in. These aren't exactly to scale yet. These are just a concept, but the idea is that these are going to be able to be removed with magnets. Once removed, it gives us access to a mounting bracket that is going to allow this enclosure to bolt into the vehicle. This is actually really critical to the owner of this vehicle. They wanted to be able to remove the enclosure really quickly if need be when they're taking this vehicle to the track so that they can enjoy it. The other design element I want to talk about is on the dash here. You can see that there's some carbon inserts going on in the dash along with red accents, so keep that in mind. That's because on the enclosure itself, I'm going to have these red accents made out of acrylic going around the outside of the subwoofer. And then on the amplifier rack cover, a similar thing. We've got these red accents around the amplifier and around these two inserts here that cover the factory mid-bass woofers. So this is the area that everything is going in. You can see those two factory woofers that we're going to be covering up with the amplifier rack beauty panel. The amplifier is going to be in the middle, and then the subwoofer enclosure right here. Now, why am I not doing a fully formed subwoofer enclosure that matches the sides and everything? Because we need to be able to get this enclosure easily in and out of the vehicle. Again, the design intent is for the enclosure to be easily removed, and then the amplifier rack is obviously going to stay in there. The amp's going to stay in there because it's going to be powering all of the component speakers. And we'll be talking more about the speakers that are planned for this build. Let's talk a little bit about the amplifier. As far as the design goes on this amplifier rack, again, notice that we have hard lines with these rounded corners. And then again, here's that circle with the extension coming out of it. In my design, again, I had to consider how is this actually going to mount into the vehicle. So what I'm going to be doing is we'll be coming up with a bracket system that will sit underneath this piece and be hidden. And in order to access it, we'll remove this amp insert in the middle here, which will give us access to a couple different bolt locations that will hold this whole assembly in the vehicle. I have some cool ideas for how that insert's going to hold in place and how everything's going to come together. You guys got to stay tuned and keep watching through the build here. After I had the final design, I went ahead and I applied some different materials just to get an idea what this is going to look like when finished. So we're going to have some vinyl materials wrapped on this part here. We'll have a vinyl insert. We're going to do carpet trunk liner on the subwoofer enclosure. Again, of course, we have those red inserts, and then I even added in, it's kind of hard to see in this picture because it's low resolution, but there is the carbon fiber inserts here. So I've just given myself some of the overall dimensions that I need to start cutting out this enclosure. Something I do want to point out here, though, is it's taken me years and years to get to this level where I'm actually designing everything and modeling it beforehand and coming up with a plan like this. I don't want you to get discouraged because you don't know how to design on a program like this. That's not what's important. What I am stressing is important is you have to have a plan. The plan can be as simple as just sketching something out on paper with pencil. Trust me, having a plan ahead of time will make a huge, huge difference. I'm done talking. Let's get into this. Now that I've got the top baffle with the cutout hole for the subwoofer, and you'll notice that I made sure I left enough distance to wrap around the front of the enclosure, I need to do what is called kerfing. So I made a little practice piece here just because I wanted to test my cuts before I accidentally messed that piece up. But what kerfing is on the saw, I basically cut through all but just a little bit of material. I leave about a little less than 1/16 of an inch. I make a series of cuts that are lined up with where this curve will be on the enclosure, and that allows me to actually curve this around the front of the box. My test piece worked out good. It's gonna be a nice flowing curve. Let's get it made. So now that I have the enclosure itself fully built with this nice curved flowing edge in the front, I need to do some of the detail work on top. Now for that detail work, you're going to see me using several different specialized tools from Mobile Solutions. These different templates and tools allow me to actually create these shapes. I'm going to kick it off with the Smart Ruler, which allows me to sketch a grid on top of my piece that I'm going to be converting into a template shape. What this grid from the Smart Ruler allows me to do is quickly create shape geometry without messing around with constantly measuring with a tape measure. For example, let's say that I want to make this line right here. What I do is I can count over a certain number of squares on this side from my center line and make a mark. I count over a certain number of squares and a half to this side, make a mark, and same for these 2 points here. Now I can connect those points using a straight edge on each side. So now I have that perfect line on each side of the shape, perfectly symmetrical. I'm going to repeat this process for all of these different lines. Now again, because I had a computer model, I was able to take all the dimensions I needed in order to start creating this shape. But if you didn't have the CAD model, you could actually literally use graph paper like this. You could draw out your shape and then just scale it up. Now that I have all my lines sketched out, I need to start adding the radiuses into the corners. So I'll do that with just using some of these circle templates. Again, you can use literally anything that you have on hand. In the early days of Mr. Old Car Audio Fabrication, this was even a template right here. You would just take the top of a spray paint can and sketch your line. So now that I have my shape completely sketched out, I need to start trimming it on the router. To do this, I start with a straight edge and I use template tape to stick it onto my board. Next, I'm using a spiral flush trim bit that has a bearing on top that will ride against the template in order to trim that wood below to the template's shape. So now I can move on to doing this part, a circle cut. And I want to make sure when I'm doing this circle cut, as soon as I get to this straight part of the cut, that I stop my cut so then I can follow up with sticking this on again and continuing that process. And I'm going to repeat this process several times. Let's knock it out. And wham! And there we have it. Completely have made my shape. So now we have our first shape here. And next I want to show you how do we create the male shape that's going to sit inside here using this existing geometry. Now I do want to point out that throughout the rest of this video, whenever I'm creating a shape, this is the process for doing it. I'm probably not going to show it throughout the rest of the video just because it is time consuming, but now you guys know, let's make this male shape inside here. To get this process started, I take a piece of scrap wood and I take my master template and I've stuck stuck it on here. You can see the two are stuck together. I've stuck it together with template tape, and I also drilled a small 1/4-inch hole. We've got the 1/4-inch spiral flush trim bit here in the router, and that hole is so that I can insert it through the wood. So I've got the router bit there. Everything is currently off. I'm gonna get the camera set up because I need 2 hands on the part for doing this, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hold this steady, I'm gonna turn on the power and make sure I'm still pressing against the bearing, and then I'm gonna carefully trim this out, making sure that I maintain contact with the bearing with this shape the whole way around. So after doing those steps, I now have this perfect male piece that fits right in here. Now, if I did want to decrease the size of this gap between the 2 pieces, because right now it's a 1/4-inch for that bit, I can do so. The way I'll do this is I'll take this piece and I'll stick it to a new piece of material that is larger, and then I'll use a flush trim bit that has an oversized bearing on it like this. That way, when the bearing rides against our existing piece of material, it's going to cut the new piece of material to be larger. In the meantime, I use this same technique to create these corner pieces that go up here. You can repeat that process off your existing master template. So shape-wise, I have everything I need now. I'm going to make a cutout in this piece for the subwoofer, of course, and then I'm going to transfer this shape to a thicker piece of material, and I'll transfer this shape to just to have a nice clean piece. So like I said, I've repeated the shape-making steps in order to make these other pieces. You'll notice that I increased the gap size here so that this is completely flush. I transferred this to 1/2-inch material as well as this. And then this is my new 1/4-inch piece here. And I know that I want this gap to be precise because I'm going to transition from carpet to vinyl. So I have a nice 1/8-inch gap in between here. Again, I controlled that gap size with the oversized bearing. Let's talk about the plan moving forward. These pieces here are going to be permanently attached to the enclosure. They're actually going to be wrapped underneath the carpet. They're just there to give the enclosure some extra shape. And then this insert will be wrapped separately and be removable. Now, since these pieces here are going to be wrapped with the carpet material together, I don't want these like hard steps. I want to add some chamfers to these pieces. So let's start with adding a chamfer to this piece. This is what the chamfer bit looks like. You can see this is a 45-degree chamfer. On this piece, the edge I'm going to be chamfering is right here, and I want to maximize the height of that cut. So in other words, if we look at it from an angle right here, I want the top of this cutting flute to be even with this top surface. But if I do that, it doesn't leave anything for the bearing to actually ride against. So really quick, I'm gonna flush trim another copy of this so that I can fully maximize that chamfer, and then I'm going to make that cut. And here we have it. See how much of a difference it makes adding that chamfer to that edge. It's gonna look super cool, nice and slick underneath the carpet. Now I'm gonna do the same thing to this piece here, and this piece here, but on these, since they're thicker, I'm only going to chamfer down to this surface. I only have to chamfer 1/4 inch, and these are 1/2 inch, so there's plenty of material for that bearing to ride against. So you can see how those chamfers are looking. Now I wanna add a round over to the outside edge and the inside edge. This is what a round over bit looks like. It adds a rounded profile. With those round overs added, you can see how doing this detail work really brings these shapes alive and adds a ton of depth and dimension to the panel. Now I did a light round over on this edge as well as this corner here just to give everything kind of a flowing look. Before I attach those pieces to the enclosure, I still need to make my round over around this edge here. Now because I curved this and filled it up with the sawdust and glue, I'm fully expecting it to kind of potentially break up a little bit when I come over with the round over bit. If it does, I'll just clean it up with body filler, no big deal. Hopefully it will hold solid. But yeah, we definitely need to add some round over to this panel here to give it that shape. And I'm gonna make marks here so I know where to stop my router bit, because obviously I don't want the round over to continue under these pieces. And here we have it. After adding that nice round over to the edge, I definitely feel like that gives it a lot more of a finished look. I love this curve on the front here. It really has that nice blend of being curvy, yet having these hard straight lines like we talked about, and incorporating some of the other design intent from the vehicle. So I've got the box completely built, still need to do the upholstery process, but I got word earlier today from Marty over at Sounds Plus, the shop that I'm collaborating on this build with, that all of the JL product has arrived. Let's head on in and check it out. That's right, the gear has arrived, so I've got it all laid out on the table here. Let's go through each of the different components that's gonna be used. And let's start with the speakers here. So here is a C5 component tweeter. This is a 3/4 inch tweeter, so part of this component set. Right here is the C5 4-inch component, so these will be going into the front of the vehicle. Nice and beefy, looking good. And then of course the speakers and the subwoofer are going to be powered by the amplifier here. This has a DSP built in so that they can integrate with the factory audio system, take the signal out of the factory audio system and do the tuning with the time alignment, equalization, crossover control. The little logo here actually comes separately, which is nice. So depending on the install, we can angle the amplifier in different directions and then mount the logo in place. For our application, it's going to be like this, sitting between those two OEM woofers underneath the amplifier rack. And then finally, since we needed a nice shallow subwoofer, we're using the JL Audio 10TW3. I know it's kind of hard to see on camera here, but if I check on my ruler and measure the mounting depth, it's a little over 3 1/4 inch for the mounting depth. So we can fit this into an enclosure really easily with shallow mount. If we look at the back of the subwoofer, you'll notice that there's no hole here into the magnet to cool the voice coil assembly. That is by design. That way we can have this be nice and close to the inside of the enclosure. And here's some nice beauty shots. You can see the spider here. The voice coil is down inside. Dual voice coil, of course, so you've got the 4 connections. And this subwoofer is not only designed to fit in a shallow mounting depth, it's also designed to use really small airspace. I believe we talked about it earlier in the video. This is just over half of a cube of sealed airspace that this is going to be going into. So Marty and his team here at Sounds Plus will be doing the installation of all the wiring of the component speakers. They'll be doing the wiring for the amplifier. And then obviously, as you've seen earlier in the video, I'm making the subwoofer enclosure for this bad boy right here. The next step is to get started on the amplifier rack. Marty's been working on a little something over here. This is Marty, owner of Sounds Plus. So unfortunately, the car is currently over at the performance shop, but hopefully it'll be here soon. You ready to get going on it? Let's go. Let's go. So now that we have received the gear and I have access to it, I can check the fitment on the subwoofer enclosure here and the amplifier rack. You can see the sub is good to go here, and I did a couple of other things in the meantime. Obviously, we need to bolt the subwoofer to the enclosure, so I added these threaded inserts. I like using threaded inserts instead of just simple wood screws because this way I can take the subwoofer in and out multiple times if need be without degrading the quality of the whole. You can see I've also made this acrylic insert. The acrylic insert actually press fits into the back of this piece that we created earlier, and in order to create that press fit gap, what I did is I used that rabbiting bit that I showed you guys. This creates a precision notch in the piece. So there we go, we have our press fit in acrylic. Now also in the meantime, I used those same shape creation techniques to create all the different shapes for the amplifier rack. One thing that did end up coming up is rather than having the amplifier along the center line between the two speakers, I did actually have to shift it over, and that's just to allow more room for the wiring that comes out of the amplifier. The amplifier will be sitting here, and the wires will actually come out this direction. JL Audio also sent over these. These are actually the grills from some of their 8-inch subwoofers, and I wanted to incorporate them into this beauty panel to sit over those OEM woofers. So what I did is I precision cut out this hole so that it is the exact OD of these grills. I have a little note for myself because I'll have to make this hole a little bit larger to allow for the vinyl clearance when I go to wrap these, but you can see that that press fits in there as well. And all of this is going to start to come together. The guys over at Sounds Plus are going to be doing the actual amplifier install and bolting it into the vehicle. So I made this template for them that they can easily put in the back of the vehicle with the 2 OEM speakers, and it will allow them to perfectly line up where they need the amplifier to go. Now I do still have some shaping that I need to do on these pieces with the different router bits. So I'm going to start with adding a round over to this piece, which is permanently attached to the baseboard. I'm going to go the round over starting here all the way around this profile. So I've rounded over this edge and made it smooth, and while I still have that round over bit loaded in, I'm also going to do the round overs on these inserts. I'm going to go all the way around the outside, around the inside of the speaker hole, and around the inside of this insert. So that gives us these. Now on this piece, I need to add a 45-degree chamfer. This is going to be permanently attached, and it's just going to be wrapped under the vinyl. And there we have it, guys. Got that chamfer added there. I also off camera added a round over on the top edge here. Now I can permanently attach this piece using some CA glue to the rest of the assembly. And then I have each of my inserts that will pull out. Everything's gapped. I've now also added these carbon inserts along with the acrylic red insert. I made sure to match the grain so it's going kind of the same angle on each side. And then I also have that acrylic red trim in there. And then I backloaded both pieces just using a rabbiting bit into the back of the piece. With this middle insert here, there's an interesting design challenge because I need to be able to easily remove it so that if we need to access the amplifier, I can actually remove this full assembly from the vehicle. This full assembly is going to be bolted down in this location, and I don't want to show the bolts, so I need a way to remove this access panel. And to hold it on, I'm going to be using magnets. These are neodymium magnets. They are extremely strong. And I have this Forstner bit right here. These are 3/8 inch in diameter. So I'm gonna use a 3/8 inch Forstner bit to make holes in both this and this panel. And then I'll push the magnets into each of those holes and adhere them in that hole with CA glue. Now that all the magnets are added, you can see that this piece has a satisfying click perfectly into place. And then if I need to remove it, it's on there nice and strong. But if you pull just right, it comes right out. I can now get started with the upholstery process. I have this nice factory match material here, this vinyl. I'm going to be wrapping this insert first. In order to do this, I spray both the piece and the material with contact adhesive and allow that contact adhesive to dry. This is key for the upholstery process. You want it to be dry to the touch. Once it is, I will start to wrap the two pieces together. The outside of this shape here press fits into another piece, so I can just trim it flush with the back. But for the inside of this shape, I'm going to trim the material, and then I'm going to tuck the edge into a rabbited groove I created on the back. The rabbited groove gives me a perfect guide to make a cut using my razor, which gives the back side of this panel a nice finished look. And with this, we have our finished vinyl wrapped piece, and this process is the same for all of the vinyl wrapped pieces throughout this project. Next, I needed to do the carpet wrapping process on the subwoofer enclosure. Of course, I do the same thing here where I apply the contact adhesive to both the subwoofer enclosure and the carpet, but I do have a trick up my sleeve that I like to do for tucking the edges of the carpet to hide the transitions. You may remember earlier in the video during the woodworking process, I added a little notched cut into the corner of the side pieces. I do this on purpose because it gives me this little groove here that I can tuck the carpet into. I can also use the edge of my shape that I added to the top of the box to trim the carpet there too, as that's where the vinyl transition will start. Got all the polyfill in, our insert is completely attached with that red trim. Time to get the subwoofer wired and installed. And just so you guys know, I of course have some ferrules on here in order to go into the wire terminals on the subwoofer. And then I made myself a little quick disconnect plug so this box can be easily removed out of the vehicle. To mount the subwoofer, I'm using those threaded inserts that I showed earlier along with some machine screws. All right, the moment we've been waiting for, I can officially remove the protective cover here. And there it is, our finished custom subwoofer enclosure for the Supra. I am really happy with the way this turned out. I'm pretty excited. I think the client is gonna be pretty excited. I think JL Audio is gonna think this is super cool. I love how these lines turned out right here. I think everything kind of blends well. I did end up making a design decision to switch up to adding some wing covers on the outside here. The bracket is actually gonna come off the back of the box on each side, and then these separate pieces are going to be what magnets into place over the bracket to hide it, and then you can just remove them in order to access it, to remove it. We'll see more on that in a little bit. I took the time to clock and orient each of these bolts exactly the same. We want this to look perfect, show car quality. What do you guys think? Now off camera in the meantime, I've also finished wrapping this right here. Here is the completed amp rack beauty panel with our grills over the OEM speakers. I wrapped this in that same upholstery vinyl that's on the subwoofer enclosure. I have these nice red accents. You can see there's the carbon insert. I really love how this geometry turned out here with the different lines. We've got some of the JL Audio speaker grills here from some of their 8-inch subwoofers that I incorporated into the design. Got the trim around the amplifier. This is probably one of my favorite builds to date. If you take a look at these corners here, these corners are really challenging to do because they're so tight and they are looking flawless. Perfect wrap there with the vinyl. And don't forget, everything is serviceable too. So if I need to access my mounting hardware, which will go up here in order to remove this from the vehicle, easy to do so. And then with the magnets, just clicks right back in place. So my friends, we've got all the parts built. Let's get them shipped over to Sounds Plus so that they can bolt them in and we can check out the final install. So here is the finished Supra install. We'll start with taking a look at the custom subwoofer enclosure. You can see that this houses the 10 TW3 from JL Audio in a shallow mount subwoofer configuration. This shape on the top of the subwoofer enclosure matches the door panels like we talked about in the design phase. It also has this red accent that matches the interior of the vehicle, along with the same upholstery vinyl on the insert piece. Remember I was talking about those panels that are on magnets. You can easily remove this out. Here's access to the hex wrench that we can use in order to get the Allen key out to take the box out. Next up, we have the amplifier rack beauty panel. The amp rack beauty panel covers the JL Audio VX800/8i DSP integrated amplifier. And on each side of the beauty panel are the OEM mid-bass speakers. Again, I made sure that I matched the interior with the red accents, and this piece also incorporates some carbon fiber inserts. Up front here in the Supra, we've got the 4-inch C5 component speaker along with the tweeter. You can see that we also made some JL Audio badges for the tweeter. The team here at Sounds Plus mounted the control knob for the amplifier in this convenient location right here. It has 2 different dials so we can control volume and we can control the subwoofer level on the bottom. Now overall, the final system sound, oh yeah. For being such a small subwoofer, the bass is really, really impressive. And with the tuning of the amplifier, crystal clear mids and highs. Now Kevin and Brittany won't actually see the Supra until it arrives at SEMA, so I can't wait to hear what they have to say when they see it. I was able to meet them though as they visited Sounds Plus, and together we shot a video talking about the overall design for the vehicle and why we were going to do some of the things the way we did them. So if you guys want to check out that video, I'll put a link down below. A big thank you to Marty and the guys over at Sounds Plus for teaming up with me on this build, and of course JL Audio for sponsoring the build and providing all of the gear. I still can't get over the bass output from this slim TW3. If you guys want to learn more about this subwoofer, check out a local JL Audio dealer, or you can visit the link down in the description. Now if you want to see the build in person, it's going to be in the Milestar Tires booth at SEMA. And guys, I would love if you could take a picture of it or with it and post it on Instagram and tag me at CarAudioFab. That would be awesome. Finally, a big thank you to you guys out there watching these videos, helping me continue to push on my passion to helping others learning how to master car audio. I love you guys. Keep rocking it. I hope to see you in an upcoming video. Don't forget to design, build, and install.